the first settlement in America, European settlement, is actually St. Augustine, Florida. And for some reason, we're always given this narrative that it was Plymouth or Jamestown because it was the English. Well, the Spanish were here in 1565. They founded St. Augustine. So Florida was discovered 1512, 1513 by Juan Ponce de Leon. Not discovered, but he first guy to land on it. They had drawn it before. But basically, within 50 years, they had a established colony. And I think you're going to see some of the buildings that come out of St. Augustine are pretty suspect, to say the least, especially when we find out that a majority of the city was made out of a early form of concrete that we don't know how to make today. So these buildings that were allegedly built in the 1880s were built in the they were probably built before that, but they say they were built in the 1880s, and they look brand new today. They hold up better than all the other buildings. I'm gonna get to those. I have some pictures of those guys. But basically, if we want to zoom back a little bit, that's when the Spanish got here, and they found the Timucua Indians.
Yep.
And the Timucua Indians are pretty interesting. They went from South Florida up to South Carolina. And the French and the Spanish ran into them when they got here. But if we go back before that, the first interesting thing that really piques our interest in Florida is the Bog Bodies. We have the Florida Bog People. And people have always thought about Florida being Atlantis or Bahamas being Atlantis, the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And this very much supports that idea because you have European. They don't like to call them European. They call them Eurasian.
Okay.
Because they had orange hair. They're anatomically European. And they are actually the oldest human burial found in Florida. And they're 7,000 years old. 7,000 to 8,000 years old.
Okay. Well, and are they found in the bogs, in the marshes? Are they, or are these in mounds as well?
We're gonna be looking at some that were found from mounds, but these first two that I'm gonna share my screen now.
Yeah.
Is you got that?
Yep.
We're in. Cool.
Yeah, we got him.
So here are the Bog Bodies. Basically, this is the Minnesota Key site, 7,000 to 8,000 years old. That's their timeline, right? That's what the mainstream's telling us, 7,000 to 8,000 years old. And they're very reluctant to talk about these guys. And pretty much the reason why they can't run away from that 7,000-year-old timeline is because it's a couple hundred yards offshore. So it's in the ocean.
What the
so
hell? They've got to go with what they say about water levels.
Exactly. So that tells us right there, those people were buried before that sea level change. So that places them pretty far back in the timeline. Now, let's take a look at what they looked like. This is like a display in a museum. This is them finding them, little bone fragments out in the ocean. Ancient burial site is older than expected. And basically, stuff, burial sites get found all the time. But why these guys are special is because they have Eurasian DNA. And they pretty much swept this under the rug. No one talks about it now. But they had orange hair. And we're going to show you that.
So
Yeah.
Are they normal size or are they bigger?
Okay. So they say that the male average was 5'9",
Okay.
but many specimens above 6 feet tall. So that's pretty tall for ancient America.
Yeah. What
But
was supposed to
basically, we're gonna get to some giants, Campbell. Don't worry. I know
All
you're foaming at the mouth for the giants. But
right.
so basically, this is experts are, they immediately started comparing these to the bog bodies of Europe. Let's take a look at those guys. And those guys all have orange hair too, even the ones in Europe. And if you know anything about Atlanteans and the Phoenicians and the Sea People, you'll know that they're described as having red hair. And that's kind of their distinct quality of the Atlanteans. Now let's take a look at there. You can read a little bit about it. 7,000 to 8,000 years old. This is the Windover site. So this one wasn't in the ocean, but it's the same time period. It's the same exact type of burial. And you see, these were so well preserved that they thought it was a murder when they first found it, because the bodies were so well preserved. So think about that. People we have trouble finding people that were killed in the Civil War. These guys were buried on purpose in a bog that has alkaline water. So when they were buried, basically, they were preserved forever until they got found. And they pulled them up and they had European DNA. And some of them had full brains in their skulls.
Wow. So it was like that was a way of almost mummifying them, like, or preserving them, was burying them in that.
Yes.
So it's like they were purposely put in the bog, not that they've sort of ended up there over time.
Now, these guys are not bog bodies, but I'm going to show you some of the giants. Basically, you find elongated skulls in Florida as well.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yes.
Nice. I haven't heard of them in North America at all.
So I'm going to share again. And
I was going to say before, I mean, it makes sense that, Florida would be the first, landing place in the Americas, because they tell us that's where, Mr. Columbus went, right? It was
in Puerto Rico.
Caribbean, and yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Right,
yeah, we're going to go back to that, and we're going to look at the Gulf Stream and what role the Gulf Stream might have played in as far as people coming across the Atlantic, especially ancient people back then in like the Ice Age, after the Ice Age. But can you see my screen?
I can.
So right here, this skull is not from Peru. This was found in the ground in Florida, this elongated skull. And this is not, they say that this is, man-made, what do they call it?
Like binding.
Yeah, skull binding. But it's not skull binding. You can tell it's not skull binding.
Yeah, the volume's too big.
Yeah, exactly. So this was found in the 1800s, and that was cataloged in this book, Certain Aboriginal Remains of the Northwest Florida Coast. And so they really couldn't get that one. That one was already in the record. But a couple years ago, or maybe it was I think it was like 2010 or something, this lady, they were building a pool, and they found multiple elongated skulls in a backyard underneath a pool. And basically what they said was they have to be Peruvian because they're elongated. This is how backwards science is today. They say, this is an elongated skull.
In Peru, so therefore, exactly.
Exactly.
Right. Go backwards, yeah.
And their whole reasoning on how this got here was that a Spaniard had taken a trophy from Peru, then got restationed in Florida and dropped his valuable skulls into the ground. And there you go.
Of course.
That's what they say. But those are elongated skulls. Let's look at some giants. Because we've got giants in Florida too. And those giant anchors that we're going to be getting to would have needed giants to be using them. Unless it was advanced tech, of course. But basically, these are the Timucua that the Europeans ran into when they got here. And just starting off, I've highlighted the interesting bits. They live for a long time, 300 years old. And he and his father was 50 years older than that. So 350 years old. And and basically he's saying we would live that. They told the Europeans they would live that long too if they ate better and didn't, drink so much. But then we see how tall they were. They exceeded our tallest man by 1.5 feet. And that was the Spaniard saying it.
So that'd put them about 7 foot at least, wouldn't it?
At least that would put them at 8 feet. He said that their tallest man was 6'3" or 6'4".
Oh wow, the Spaniards, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And actually, we're gonna get to another part of this. What countries have the most orange hair? Ireland and Scotland, right?
Yeah.
Well, basically, did you know Columbus was led to America by a Irish man?
I heard that he acquired maps from someone. I don't know who that was, but
he had a navigator whose name was William Harris, and on the ship's log, they named him Guillermo Harris in Spanish. Isn't that funny?
Right. Yeah, of course.
But he was Irish, and he met Christopher Columbus, and he convinced Columbus he could bring him to a new landmass. And that's not even a conspiracy theory or anything. That's just fact. But you'll see there's some more connections with the Celts, because when the French and Spanish got here and met these people, the Timucua, who were much taller than them, they compared them. They said they looked most like the Picts of Ireland and Scotland. Okay. That's pretty unusual, isn't it?
Yes, it's a fairly strange thing to say. Yeah, if they're Indians, especially.
Yeah. So you see this, it says a thigh bone measuring 38 inches in length. These are newspaper clippings from 1913.
Yeah, because I've got a few of those too. There was quite a few dug up, and of course there's Patagonia, South America, but there's a lot of giant talk right in the Americas. But I was going to say as well, the coneheads, like the elongated skulls, they have red hair too.
Right, they do. And the Peruvian ones too, right?
Yeah,
the Paracas,
but they're clearly a different species.
Yeah.